my city. Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob Acquire. And as the title of the episode suggests, I think coming out of the bye week, the Panthers need to temper expectations. I think we're riding a high of a 2-game win streak and haven't really come to terms with the reality that is the current roster. But before we get into kind of the breakdown of the matchup against the Chiefs on Sunday, I think it's fitting to talk about some news about the semi-finalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the Carolina Panthers have 2 guys on that list. Do you want to kick that off?
Well, if we want to get technical, I think you could throw Jared Allen in there, a pivotal piece on the Super Bowl run, but 2 born and bred Panthers. One of them took a brief siesta in Baltimore. If you listen to Julian Edelman's podcast, it was almost New England. It was not really almost San Francisco, but Steve Smith is a finalist yet again. I think this is coming up on year 3 as him as a finalist. And Luke Kuechly in his first eligible class is a finalist for the Hall of Fame. I personally think Luke has a really good chance to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, probably the best linebacker of the 2010 decade, up there with Wagner, one of the best pre-snap linebackers ever, if not the best, and probably a top 5 middle linebacker when it's all said and done. You can't really deny his stats. Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, broke up J.J. Watt's streak there. First team all defense, I think 6 out of the 8 years he played. Second in 2 of those years, defensive rookie of the year. Just super good player, has the list of accomplishments, has the moments on film. He's, I think, if not this year, next year, but I certainly expect him to get in this year. Steve Smith is I think the more questionable one, and I personally think he should be in. There are receivers that have gotten in over him, I don't think should have gotten in. Torrey Holt is still up there, and I don't think he was better than Steve Smith was. So it might be an uphill battle for Smitty this year, but certainly Luke Kuechly has a great chance to make it into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, I think Luke Kuechly is the definition of a first ballot Hall of Famer. The biggest thing missing from his resume is longevity, like we've seen with Bobby Wagner, and the fact that he's still playing at an extremely high level well into his 30s. So that's really the only knock on Luke Kuechly. His resume is pristine, and I can't the number of interviews of other players on offense saying how frequently he called plays. I've never ever heard of a defensive player kind of having that command pre-snap. And that's insane. Again, that's what's worthy of putting you in the Hall of Fame. The All-Pro teams speak for themselves on his resume. And I think one of the more impressive feats was just as much as he was a film junkie, he was an athletic freak. I mean, this guy on back in the 2010s, and you have workout competitions, he was out box jumping everybody on the team. This is a guy that not only was studying in the film room, knew exactly what was going on. He was also one of the most physically gifted athletes, cover linebackers. It just phenomenal to watch every time that he was on the field. It was so exciting having Cam Newton on one side and Luke Kuechly on the other. And then the Steve Smith, we talked about him a lot on Tuesday, but this is a guy that's won a Triple Crown, is top 10 in a lot of different metrics and categories for wide receivers as a whole. And that should put you in this conversation that he keeps getting in the semi-finalist position. And it's just unfortunate guys like Devin Hester, who obviously turned their careers into just returns. And Steve Smith was an excellent returner, but he was a better wide receiver, and that's why he stopped returning. So it's unfortunate when it's I feel like Steve Smith might have hit some of those numbers, and it's just because he was so good at a wide receiver position that pulled him away, especially with the need at wide receiver the Carolina Panthers had in the 2000s and 2010s. So I know I'm rambling, but yeah, that's our cases for those guys making as finalists. They are in that semi-finalist round. Like you said, I'm very much in agreement with you that Luke Kuechly seems to almost be a lock. And then I would say Steve Smith, again, is kind of on that fringe outskirt.
Yeah, like I guess the thing with Devin Hester is like, would you say Cordero Patterson's going to be a Hall of Famer one day? Like he wasn't as good a returner as Hester, but he's got his name up there in the kick return touchdown ranks as well. You're right. If Steve Smith were not as good a receiver, he would have had more return touchdowns. His first touch was a return touchdown in the league. So I don't know. I think him getting a triple crown on a team that ran more than anyone else in the league, you knew he was the only viable receiver, and he still punked all the corners. Yeah, he has to get in. I might be a little biased to know we're both huge fans of Steve Smith. If you watch Tuesday's episode, you even had the Ice Up Son shirt on. So yeah, I think our fandom speaks for itself. But yeah, I'd like to see both of those guys get in the Hall of Fame, especially after we had our first drafted Carolina Panther, Julius Peppers, make it in last year. Obviously, Sam Mills made it back almost a decade ago now, but the first like born and bred Panther was Julius Peppers that got in. Although he left a little bit, so did Steve Smith. I would love to see a full career Carolina Panther like Kuechly get in. Not a ton of full career players that play at that high of a level for one team across any team. So that would be super, super cool. But I think we can get into the game this week where you're talking about we need to temper our expectations. I'm going to say, I don't know. I saw, I believe it was Mike K posted a tweet after the Chiefs lost, and he said, we're going to get a pissed off version of the Chiefs in Bank of America Stadium this Sunday. Then I saw underneath it a Panthers fan replied, this is on Twitter, I've been pissed off almost every Sunday for 7 years as a Panthers fan. This means nothing to me. And that's kind of how I feel. We're in the black helmets, the black jerseys. It's going to be a funeral for the Chiefs. I guess that's the idea they want going into this week. But I think this is certainly going to be a tougher matchup than the Giants were or the Saints were or even the Broncos a couple weeks before that. We should temper our expectations for this game because this is not a shoe-in win or even a shoe-in competitive game like the last couple weeks were.
Yeah, and the Chiefs like keeping their opponents in games, so there's a chance that we can kind of keep it to a one-possession game, make it come down to a final drive scenario, and that's definitely in the cards. But I want to kind of clue into what Dave Canales said in his press conference yesterday, and he was talking about how Spagnuolo does a lot of intricate things on defense between some of the exotic blitzes and coverages they'll deploy and execute. And he kind of inferred that like the best thing that they could do was stick to what they do best and just stick to your bread and butter. And so far that has been the run game. And so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, we're kind of presenting a graphic of how well the Panthers have ran in different kind of categories: inside zone, man duo, outside zone, power runs, and how well the Chiefs are at defending those. And believe it or not, the Chiefs are one of the best run defenses currently in the league. They rank third in EPA per rush and fourth in success rate. So really, really stout against the run. That's led by Chris Jones up front. They've drafted guys like George Karlaftis and Charles Omenihu, who they've signed in free agency.
Right. And he's coming back this week as well.
Yes.
So that's another guy they get back.
Felix Anajuke-Uzama, they just traded for Josh Uche. I mean, this is just a stacked defensive line. They have solid linebackers at the next level. We were talking that pre-recording. These are just playmakers they have in their front seven, and they're going to be able to take away one of these strengths for the Panthers. And so I think what this is going to come down to is Bryce Young's going to have to win this game on third down. When given the opportunity, maybe in some short yardage situations and you're going against man coverage, you got to find Adam Thielen, Jatavian Sanders, guys that are going to have mismatches at the next level and take advantage of those. And if we aren't able to execute, it's going to be a very, very long day with a lot of 3 and outs.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point. Like looking at this graphic, they're allowing 3.5 yards per carry or less, basically in every type of run, right? And Chuba likes to run up the middle, so that's going to be a bit of a struggle against this big Chiefs front. I think the not trump card, but the maybe the jack or queen up his sleeve, not necessarily an ace because we haven't seen this guy on the field yet. Jonathan Brooks, I think he's a good bit quicker than Chuba is. Maybe can bounce it outside more. Certainly an upgrade on third downs over Miles Sanders as a check down option. So it'll be interesting to see him out there. But you mentioned Adam Thielen on third downs. And I think he's going to have a huge game because what did we see all of last year on third downs when Bryce converted the ball? It wasn't Mingo catching the ball. It certainly wasn't DJ Chark catching the ball. He might have been targeted, but he was dropping it. It was Adam Thielen moving the chains when we actually moved the chains, right? So I think that rapport is going to be huge if Thielen's able to play even like half of the full wide receiver snaps. I don't expect him to run a full 50 routes or anything, considering he's just coming back this week. But I think he's going to have a huge day. JT Sanders, like you said, just had the touchdown in Germany, or I guess 2 weeks ago now. I think he'll have another huge day as well, because these linebackers, while you're right, they're really great focusing the run. I think Drew Tranquil's really the only good cover linebacker that they have that can take away the tight end, that can match up with Adam Thielen in these short and intermediate routes. So I think they're going to have to be important. And then Coker and Leggett, I think they're going to have to test whoever the Chiefs corner 2 is, because McDuffie's playing really well this season, but the other corners aren't necessarily holding up their end of the secondary, so to speak. So I think Leggett, using his big body, might have some mismatches against some of the smaller corners. Maybe Coker can make stuff happen. We've seen him high point a lot of catches over the past couple of weeks. I think they're going to have big games as well.
Yeah, no. And when you look at it from that standpoint, it's all about this being a team game, that when certain cards are called, whether it's a dump off to Chuba Hubbard or Jonathan Brooks, they're able to make the first guy miss and gain those extra yards. For Xavier Leggett, it's coming down with those contested catches and not getting the ball ripped out of your hands. For Coker, it's not dropping some of those passes on third down that can keep the chains moving. And then obviously for Bryce, it's not taking bad sacks, knowing where to go with the ball and knowing when to dirt it, because this can be a long game. There's a chance with how the Chiefs have played throughout this entire season that we can keep this into a one possession game. What I will say is their defense, while it is really good, their offense hasn't scored over 30 points all year. They've only been held under 20 points, though, twice this year, and that was against the Chargers and the Broncos, division opponents that have top 5 defenses. So that's not something that I think we should expect necessarily, is that we're going to hold them underneath it, but maybe holding them under 30. Getting lucky on a couple special teams plays, maybe a couple fumbles, Patrick Mahomes getting pressured and throwing an errant pass. We saw that on the first drive against the Bills. It's stuff like that, that if you're able to capitalize on a couple of mistakes that they're going to have, that's what's going to keep you in the game and not making those mistakes yourself. So again, I think there's a lot of pressure the Chiefs defense is going to put on the Panthers offense and what they do best. And it's up to Bryce Young and the rest of the players on offense to really make up for that and be able to find opportunities and execute on those when given.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with the Chiefs not being as fundamentally sound throughout the entire game as they have been in the past couple years. We've seen Mahomes make some boneheaded interceptions. I'm not going to say the one at the end of the game was necessarily on him, because he had to push the ball downfield. They were down, I think, 9 points at that point. They had to score.
Yeah.
And Terrell Bernard, standout linebacker for the Bills. He's coming. I think he was a rookie last year. He's really coming along as a young player, intercepts Mahomes and ends the game there. If we can get him to make a couple of mistakes, I think we can keep this competitive. Like you said, they haven't scored over 30, only once, you said? Over 30?
No,
or they haven't at all.
No.
I think
but they've only allowed one team over 30 points, and that was the Buffalo Bills this past week. Yeah. We don't have Josh Allen. We don't have that kind of firepower.
And again,
on offense.
We've only scored over 30, I believe, just the Raiders game. So we're not a high-powered offense like you're saying. I think what's going to be key is, while they have a really good interior, just like us, in terms of O-line, their tackle play hasn't been the most sound this season. And with getting DJ Wonnum back, he'll have a full 2 weeks of rest following his first game. He had, I don't want to say like a superstar game by any means versus the Giants, but he held his own. I think he had 6 pressures. He had the sack on Daniel Jones, who I know Mahomes is a better QB than Daniel Jones, but Jones is much more athletic. I think he's a bit faster and a bit bigger as well, so a little bit harder to bring down physically. Obviously, Mahomes is a better scrambler and knows where to be on the field. Wonnum's going to have a big day, I think, against that Chiefs O-line, getting pressure on Mahomes, forcing him to step up and make those throws. Like the first interception, I think it was like he was getting hit or it was tipped, and it ended up in, I can't remember, Taylor Rapp's hands. But maybe get some of those. Ashawn Robinson had a really good game versus the Giants. Need to get him involved, getting pressure up the middle. I don't think our D-line is up to the task necessarily of getting multiple sacks on Patrick Mahomes. But I think they can create havoc when they need to on those third downs. And that's really where we need to key on as a defense, because, again, it's Mahomes. I don't think we're going to stop him. Xavier Worthy in the passing game really came on versus the Bills. He's the guy who scares me the most on the Chiefs offense, outside of Mahomes, obviously. We're going to need to do a good job on him and DeAndre Hopkins, who has, I think, grown more accustomed to the Chiefs offense over the past couple of weeks since he's been on the team. I think defensively, that's where I'm keying in, is on those two receivers. And how is Coach Evero going to put J.C. Horn and deploy the rest of the secondary against them? Because I think J.C. Horn can shut down DeAndre Hopkins for what it's worth. But are you going to have a 4-2? I think Worthy's the fastest guy ever in the combine now. You're going to have that guy just running free past him. Like, how are you going to do that? That's like my question for the defense.
Yeah, you're going to have to the bracket Xavier Worthy with a safety. We were already talking about maybe putting Xavier Woods on Travis Kelce and having Josie Jewell be the underneath help and presence when Kelce and Noah Gray are kind of the linebackers that are out running routes. I think the biggest thing is, and Andy Reid's really good at kind of, I think, modifying the script to take away different things that the defense does well. And in the case of DJ Wanham, maybe having a chance against a guy like Wanya Morris coming off the edge is great from a one-on-one matchup standpoint. But if you're able to get Xavier Worthy in motion coming across the formation to force DJ Wanham to hesitate a little bit, you're able to execute well on certain run designs. It's going to kind of stay the pass rush to an extent. And so it might be able to mitigate just based on how they're able to scheme things up and if they're able to be successful. And the thing is their offense is really good. They're 10th in EPA, they're first in success rate. They have one of the best successful run games in the NFL. And that's surprising because this is an offense that seemed to sputter over the course of the season. And they just know when to get yards. Kareem Hunt, it's like third in short situations, even fourth in short situations. That's the guy that's able to plow forward and get a few yards. You're getting an angry runner back in Isaiah Pacheco this week. And again, this is a team that is kind of pissed off. I mean, they were in that game against the Bills and they let a couple things go at the end and they want to get back on track. And so this is a get right game for them. I don't know if it's so much a trap game anymore since they are no longer undefeated. Yeah. And just being at the pedigree that they're at and the talent level they have on both sides, it forces a lot of our key players, Bryce Young and some of the young offensive skill players on offense. Then you have DJ Wanham and a couple of these guys on defense that they have to step up and have monster games for us to be in this from start to finish.
For sure. And I think to close with the what to focus on with the Chiefs, you brought up both Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco's coming back. It's his first game since week 2, so he's going to be fresh. And they're not necessarily world beaters by any means. I don't think either of them are better than Chuba. They're certainly not on the upper echelon of running backs this year. But I think what's interesting, you mentioned they get the tough yards. It's like the old Ezekiel Elliott adage. If you need him to get you 2 yards, he's going to get you 4. If you need him to get you 8 yards, he's going to get you 4. That's what both of those running backs can do. And I don't think it's any surprise that this team is high in success rate because they know how to churn out those short yards when they need to. And they have Patrick Mahomes, who's one of the better scramblers all time, right up there with Rodgers, to be able to keep the play alive. So I don't necessarily think we're going to win, but I do think there's a chance to keep this close. And if they make mistakes and we capitalize on them at the end of the game, maybe we can kick a game-winning field goal and it doesn't get blocked. But I think I'm going to have to go with the Chiefs on this one. I think you're going to go there too. I don't know.
No, I want to go with the Chiefs. The game that this reminds me of, and I always like bringing this back to like different Panthers games and eras, but 2015, the Panthers were on the road against the Titans. Obviously, we're still undefeated at that point, but it's one of those situations where it does look like a trap game, and it was a little bit sluggish to start. We weren't necessarily rolling on all cylinders, but as the game got later and later, we were able to stretch our lead against the Titans. And so I think what was a 1 to like a 10 point, like it was 7 to 10 point lead for most of the game. All of a sudden we were able to pull away at the end. Cam Newton dances on the crowd. A distraught mother writes a letter to Cam and the Panthers organization on how her kid is now traumatized. But regardless of all that, the score of that was 27-10. So this isn't my perfect take, but I would say if there's a score prediction I would have, it's 27-13. I could see it being 20-13 late, and they just get a touchdown, whether it's a defensive touchdown or a touchdown late that kind of puts the game away and seals it.
Yeah, I was going to say, is Mahomes going to bust out a new celebration and make some elderly lady at Bank of America distraught? Is that what's going to go down? I don't know.
Cam was dabbing well before that, but maybe Mahomes pulls out something.
Maybe he's got a new one. Yeah, that
Jackson
Taylor
Mahomes
Swift
runs
copy,
on
for her tour or something. I don't know. Will she be at Bank of America Stadium? Who knows? That's a big factor. At least last year it was for Travis Kelce. I think we're going to get into perfect takes territory now because we've covered the game, I think, pretty well. We're both picking the Chiefs, right? I think there's no explanation there. Today, Thursday Night Football, we do our perfect parlays on Thursday. And the last 2 weeks, I've gotten my half right. And it's been focused on the game that happens following this episode or following when we record this episode. Tonight is a divisional matchup, Pittsburgh at Cleveland. And the spread right now is 36.5. I'm like, why is it so low? Because it might snow in Cleveland and it's going to be like between 20 and 30 degrees. So it's going to be nice and cold, right? I think this is going to be a ground-focused game. As good as the Steelers' front is in terms of sacking the quarterback, they allow rushing TDs a ton. They've allowed one in every single game except for one. And I think that since Jameis became the starter, the Browns haven't scored a rushing touchdown yet, which is kind of bizarre. You think they've been putting out numbers, but really it's Jameis gunning it down the field, and Elijah Moore, Judy, or Cedric Tillman is there to catch it. I think, and this is my perfect take, the Browns have their first rushing touchdown since Jameis Winston became the starter tonight. It's going to be cold, frigid. The Steelers allow a lot of rushing touchdowns. And an interesting note, and this is why I haven't picked this game yet. Mike Tomlin, since he's been the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, is 0-7 on Thursday Night Football against divisional opponents. And I don't know. I was just gassing up the Steelers on Tuesday, but maybe they stumble here. I don't know, but I know for certain the Browns are going to run one in, and that's going to be my part of the perfect parlay. If we're building, we're still going to do it because you're moving to Sunday, so that's the catch.
Yeah, I mean, we can obviously make a parlay. It's just got to be put in tonight. My question is actually no, because some of the parlay lines, we're gonna have to see if there's a sports book that has some lines open. But in regards to tonight, do you think it's a Nick Chubb run? Do you think Jameis Winston sneaks it in?
I'm gonna go Nick Chubb. I'm gonna go Nick Chubb.
All right,
yeah.
So a Nick Chubb rushing touchdown.
He has one in his first game back. He had a touchdown, but since then, nothing. I think it will be Nick Chubb.
Okay. You heard it here first. Jacob thinks Nick Chubb is going to get a rushing touchdown tonight in Cleveland against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I like the line for that game. The fact that it's 3.5. I think a lot of people are juiced up right now on the Steelers off a big divisional win. The Browns are coming off a loss. They're playing at home, short week. Anything can happen. And I love that. That makes it a very entertaining matchup. For me, my perfect take is that I think JT Sanders is going to be a touchdown recipient this coming Sunday. So even though I predicted a score of like 27-13, which would probably mean just one touchdown, I just want to kind of look at some stats of the Chiefs defense against tight ends in recent weeks. So over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed usually an average of one touchdown a game. They allowed 2 last week, 1 the week before, and then I think 4 weeks ago they allowed 1 as well. So they've allowed some production through the air to the point that 6 out of the past 8 games against tight end rooms, they've allowed 80 plus yards. And over the last 8 games, they've allowed at least 5 receptions to tight ends. So knowing that we run 11 personnel over 80%, almost 90% of the time this year, it's going to be JT Sanders on the field, especially for pass-heavy drop-back snaps. And so that means he's going to get a lot of targets. And I think that's an advantage that the Panthers have in terms of a mismatch. And Bryce Young's early off, and I think that's what's going to help kind of keep the chains moving. And if he's able to have a couple yak plays like he did against the Saints, that's going to be vital in us keeping this a close game.
I think my only question for you, I like that one, by the way. My only question for you is, do you think Thielen coming back and being the safety blanket for Bryce on shorter intermediate routes or on third downs, do you think that might take away from Sanders' chances at all, or do you still like him to get in the end zone?
So my question would be, do you think Spagnuolo thinks JT Sanders is a bigger issue or Adam Thielen? And we don't know what Adam Thielen is right now, but based on his production last year, I would put more emphasis on Thielen. If he's got a couple hitches and curls, I want my linebackers dropping to those spots, which may allow JT Sanders a one-on-one opportunity, which we saw the pass interference call again against the Saints a couple weeks ago. That was pivotal in us moving the chains and winning that game. So again, I could see it going either way, but just because I think Spagnuolo has a little bit more respect for the veteran over the rookie, that's what's going to play the bigger factor.
All right. I like that one. I think that's going to do it for us, unless you have anything else. Nope. All right. For Perfect Takes from me, from Steven, this is a quick one. Thursdays are usually quick ones. We just want to go over the Panthers game. On Tuesday, hopefully, we'll be talking about another Panthers win. Wouldn't 3 in a row be like super nice? I don't even remember the last. Matt Rule's second year, first 3 weeks. That's
Yep.
when it was. But you can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Tuesday, we'll be back breaking down the game, and hopefully, like I said, we'll be talking about a win. But until then, keep pounding.